Hello and welcome back to the Double Swing. It's the final of our 3 installations related to ESL Pro League XIX. It's been, well, not as long and hard of a slog as we expected initially, because both of us, I believe, were under the impression this would be like a whole 4-week, 5-week affair that just never seems to end. Thankfully, for our sakes, the sanity of the casters, and honestly, viewership, it's not that long of an event this time. It's actually fairly condensed, if all things considered. We've got like 32 teams coming into this event, right? So it's a decent schedule to get them all reduced down. But A, B, and C, D are pretty much done. We've just got a couple decider games left for Group C and D. But we're going to recap quickly our A and B picks and our C and D picks just to see how we're doing and also give you an update on the score. So Groups A and B, the underdogs were a little harder to pick here. I think that was fair enough because those teams, in those groups especially, were a lot closer than maybe some of the things we saw later down the line. I think when we talked about this early on, the groups did seem to get progressively worse as we went from A down to D. And so Group A, we got some great favourite picks. Group B as well. But man, once you get to the underdogs, it got a little more difficult to pick. So some impressive performances, but no wins really.
Yeah, I mean, we had 3 actual underdogs we could pick in Group A and 4 that we could have picked, like, in theory, in Group B as well. So, there wasn't a lot of wiggle room. We were bound to... Honestly, we were kind of set up to not have an underdog pick be successful in Group A because you just have such limited options and there are just better teams inside that group anyway. So, not really surprised that neither, Fnatic and Soul that we ended up picking actually didn't go through when we think about like just how many other eligible teams there were within this group.
Yeah, it was rough, and honestly, I got my hopes up. I've picked Fnatic. They win their opening game against VirtusPro. I'm looking good. I'm thinking, yeah, I'm a genius. There was no...
I did feel stupid picking VirtusPro as soon as that happened. I'm like, oh... I thought they might need a little bit of lead time, but losing to Fnatic still wasn't on the cards for me. So
yeah, I love that. I love that. It was twofold as well because I didn't pick VirtusPro. I didn't make that. It wasn't much of a bold pick. I did rate the pick at the time, but just I didn't have to take that risk having taken FaZe. So wow, that was a roller coaster. But then when they go to lose to 3D Max, and then just crash and burn afterwards, it got real depressing real fast. We came crashing back down to earth as to what Fnatic really are, which is a team that still haven't figured out their identity and how they're going to play going forward if they want to remain like a top-level competitor, because it's just not quite it. There's something that needs to change, I think, structurally and in terms of leadership.
Yeah, almost certainly. And also, the context for ESL Pro League is that people also do know what their matchup is very well in advance. So the first round games are probably the hardest games to play as a favorite, just because, they're going to come in that extra bit more prepped. VirtusPro haven't had a lot of time to integrate players like Electronic. They're not changing things too dramatically. There are reasons that upsets can happen in the opening rounds at Pro League, just because the team that is the underdog understands how much work they need to do sort of coming into the event ahead of that first game.
Yeah, so it all makes sense in the end, which is why we've also ended up with this calamitous result of 3D Max are a 2 seed.
Yeah.
Oh lord, why? I mean, they beat Saw, which in the opening game, you think Saw 3D Max, they probably play each other like 10 times a year in all the online competitions, the low-level stuff. This upset isn't crazy. The problem is they then get to play Fnatic, stomp them, and just move on to the playoffs. So 3D Max being the underdog that made it out of this group, literally no one actually predicted. I don't think anyone looked at that group and said, I'm taking the French. No one had that on the cards.
It was a 50-50 for you. Like, I remember I picked Soul first, and then you had a choice between Fnatic or 3D Max.
And... It's not a 50-50, though, because Fnatic are just so much more talented. There's no way you believe at this point that this French team is going to be the one to make it out, like to make an impact.
But this French team, where you're saying Fnatic doesn't have an identity, this French team kind of does. So, I wouldn't say it's the most... It's not the most intricate design. It's not the most intricate identity. But it's an identity nonetheless. I think they understand how they want to play Counter-Strike, to a certain degree at least.
No, sure, there is that element. It's just... they had
no, I mean,
two
I don't hate
as well. Like,
I didn't hate the Fnatic angle. I'm just saying,
was
leverage
not
the
the
argument.
time to pick 3D Max.
Yeah,
Let's just put it
yeah,
that way.
definitely wasn't.
And so the fact they make it through ended up being a bit of a disaster for us. But no, in the other side of the other group, you did get your pick go through. Your underdog of BetBoom made it out, essentially at the expense of mine, because I picked M80. And speaking of things looking brilliant, look at this run. M80 opening game, BetBoom, they lose. I'm a bit sad. They then go down, beat Sharks. Should be a guarantee. They drop a map. I'm a bit scared. They then get a 2-1 victory over G2. I am losing my mind at home. So I'm thinking, you've now just beaten what should be one of the 6 best teams at the entire event. Surely you can now beat BetBoom. No, they lost to BetBoom. they had a chance to make it out. They lose to BetBoom. And then in the decider games, they beat Tyloo. There, whatever. And get crushed by G2, finally. You're like, this was so close. It was so close, especially because the G2 game, they lose an OT on their own pick. Someone else show up. It's just been the MOUZ show until that point, and then the final map, not even he shows up. They just whimper. But I was so hyped when M80 started showing, started kicking, started fighting back. They just couldn't make it happen, and BetBoom, your pick go through, so you take a point there. You actually had the lead.
It's just, yeah, I mean, I didn't expect M80 to impress me as much as they did at this event. One, because, well, I think there was a period where, when this team was first announced, both you and I had this conversation about how excited we were about, the prospect of MOUZ in a team, but also this sort of Gilgamesh of sort of free agents and talented players from many different walks of life. It was quite an exciting project for that purpose. But I didn't think that when they added Sin, they'd look so good so quickly. But they seem to be very impressed with Sin and what he's able to offer up, because he's in-game leading. And I think I was talking to... I think I was on Maui stream with Stamina. Stamina's their coach, right?
I think
making
so.
Sure I've got that correct.
Yeah, I don't want to be rude, but he used to be a player. I'm pretty sure. Is he coaching Wildcard or something?
No, so he is the analyst for M80.
Oh, okay, straight up. Okay.
Yeah, and he was talking about how naturally Sin was as an in-game leader, and how he came in with dossiers of preparations and how he wants to operate things effectively, but it didn't seem reminiscent of big Counter-Strike, which is something I thought would very inherently be a factor, for him to join this team, from coming the big academy squad, which is basically a testing ground for the big main team to go in. So I just, I was kind of surprised how good they look so quickly, but it's clear that Sin put in a lot of work, but also the stars actually did show up. Sin had some good maps, MOUZ had some great performances. There's some questions to be answered for some of the rest of the talent that M80 is supposed to have. But yeah, I think they honestly should have made it through. I think the fact they lost to BetBoom twice is a bit of a kick in the teeth.
It really is, and feels a bit odd to point fingers and trying to find a scapegoat, considering how well they performed at their first event. They did. It's an impressive run. You can't say otherwise. But yeah, there were times where I wanted either Rek or Swisher, just one of the two, to have a little bit more going. I think maybe they were the slowest to adapt, maybe to this new IGL, because, MOUZ is the guy who gets launched in head first, maybe gets to pick his own fights. Perhaps they have the most to get acclimatized to, compared to him and compared to Slacks, who's maybe familiar with Sin from prior German teams. I don't actually know if they have any crossover, but...
I don't believe so, but...
In any case...
They'll have interacted, when you're in domestic scenes, that you rub a few shoulders.
Exactly, so... I guess I could make an excuse for them. I wanted to see more from them. I was hoping we'd get more, because Rek has impressed me a lot, especially when they've had big series wins over Liquid domestically, and they've qualified for events. You've had great performances from Rek as an anchor. You've had Swisher finding more impact than he did here, so I was hoping to see more from them. But yeah, it's right. Sin adapting so quickly, playing also individually at such a high level, was shocking, impressive, and exactly what they needed. So I think it's pretty promising for M80. We do have a real contender emerging in North America as not just they're locking in the third spot, but they're sniffing, they're scratching out that door. They want to be second, top, even if Complexity slide a little more and Liquid keep struggling. They are right there and ready. So pretty excited with that. Happy with the pick, all things considered. Considering they didn't make it through, I still managed to be happy with the pick, and that says a lot.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally reasonable. And then I had GamerLegion, which, to be honest, felt more like a
Yeah,
risk to
your
me.
Group C pick was a riskier one, but
Yeah, I was really surprised with. Well, I wasn't surprised by how well they did. More so that they didn't have issues closing games. I always find that with GamerLegion, they have good game plans. They come in with good game plans. They start games quite well, but especially when they're adding new pieces, that's where things get a bit shaky. And I don't think that's a slight on GamerLegion. I think that's just a team thing in general. Adding new pieces is difficult, and making sure everyone is comfortable and everyone has the right headspace is difficult. But hey, man, I think they looked solid at this event. I think Andu put in a good shift, as I would hope he would, considering he's effectively going to be one of the stars on this roster. And I don't think I had much to say about Slend. In all honesty, I thought he was fine. I think he did his job, and didn't really fall below that margin for me. So
I think they got another one of those more favourable runs. The ones you'd kind of expect. Also, I mean, Group C, we're starting to get a little weaker in terms of level of competition. As we said, it seemed to just go from A to D, just slowly downhill. They beat Ents, who I didn't expect much of in this event. Despite having Glaive, it still hasn't turned around. They still are just the Katowice peak team. And they beat Ents twice. They beat Forza once. The GamerLegion run does have its asterisks in terms of how excited you are for them going forward.
yeah.
But you have to say, no matter how much you want to be doubtful about them, Slend and Andu seem like the perfect signings. And that's great, because, yeah, Volt, you still got the same sort of level from him. Snacks called a decent game, played decently individually. Isaac was, on the games I watched, he wasn't special, but he didn't need to be, because the things that you needed to really click and really punch was Andu smashing heads on the openings, and Slend finding picks, finding his moments. And I think in the games they won, he definitely did. I'm not so sure about the games they didn't win, because I honestly wrote the game off against MOUZ and didn't bother watching it, because
That is,
why waste my
yeah.
time on that 15-minute affair?
They're out of their league
Yeah,
a little bit, yeah.
they were never going to win that game, so I just didn't bother. I instead tuned into, I think, was it Liquid Monty was at the same time as that one? I thought that was going to be a more interesting game, so I watched that instead. But no, they won the games, essentially, when you look at it, they probably should be winning if you consider the pedigree of their calling, coaching, the core they've already established. They probably should be winning these games, especially if you're like me and you don't rate Ents, you don't think much of them right now. These are definitely winnable games, so happy for them. They've made the right decisions in terms of cutting players and bringing players in. I'm probably, just spoilers for the video ahead, doubtful I'm going to be picking them as one of my picks in the actual playoffs. But a really great run for them, and a solid pick of underdogs, honestly. They were the right team in that sense.
Yeah, I fear that for GamerLegion, the biggest issue that they're gonna ever have, moving into playoffs, is getting everyone well adjusted to the amount of prep and the workload that's ahead of them each and every day. Because I have this suspicion that one, Ash is probably working them pretty hard to get them into the right positions and understanding how their opponent is going to play. I think I can't remember where I heard this, but and this could be total waffle, but I'd heard Snacks is very intent on drilling players to make sure they also understand their anti-strat material. So it's I think there's quite a lot of work for GamerLegion to sort of adjust when it comes to playoffs or deep tournament runs. But probably 2 or 3 events from now, they're going to be that same underdog fight, punching up, taking wins off of, the elite level teams. And maybe even, to be honest, if their trajectory looks as good as it does here, then I could actually see them winning a top tier tournament if they have that continued growth. But I think there has to be an adjustment or an understanding of just kind of the work that needs to be put in to get there. That takes time.
bloody muted that for that entire thing. But yeah, as I was saying, to myself and to Yumi, but not to the recording, I initially want to scoff at that idea. But no, you are pretty much entirely correct. That is not unreasonable. It will take time, and obviously we remain to see like how these guys react on stage. Thankfully, they're not going to have the problem of, well, I hope they're not going to have the problem of their IGL having choking issues or their IGL feeling the pressure because he snacks. You know, he's got so many big pressure moments already, like under his belt. Like, he should be fine, surely. Sure, he's never done it as an IGL, but hopefully that's not going to be the problem. It's just going to be about the young guys, the guys who've never been on stage, you know, looking out to see 10,000 faces and not really feeling too heavily impacted by it. It's always going to have some effect, whether that be to hype you up or make you a little nervous, but hopefully they can work through it. And then it's not unreasonable. They definitely have the talent and the structure behind the scenes to make that happen now. The other thing that happened, because I'm going to be honest, we've kind of glossed over favourites. In case y'all didn't notice, every favourite from A, B, and C we picked went through. All good. Then Group D. Yeah. Group D happened. Now, I got NAVI. I'm very happy with that pick. They technically haven't decided their seeding, if they're a 1 or a 2 seed, but they're definitely going through. But somebody picked Heroic. And that somebody is not me, so figure that one out. And it went catastrophically wrong for Heroic. They only have managed to beat NIP once out of 2 attempts and FlyQuest at this event and have been eliminated. What do we blame for this? And how much stock do you put in a certain transfer rumour we've heard circulate the last day or so?
It's okay. I don't know that the transfer rumor will be accurate. I think half of it might be true. The other half, a little uncertain about. The rumor basically being that Dexter would come in for Nikodos.
Yes. Yes. Just in case anyone hasn't seen that.
Yeah. Nikodos, I think he understands himself that he's been underperforming. And I just think that's a little... it sucks for him. I've never really been a massive Nikodos encourager, a glazer. I wouldn't say I've really been a fan of Nikodos through his tenure on some of these top level teams, especially after all the overhype I think he got from Copenhagen Flames. That said, this is below his standard even. So it's a little bit of a shame for him, but I think that is probably the direction that Heroic need to go in. Like, Shush and Tessa's looking great so far on Heroic, but he's also not really been signed, or continued to be signed with this Heroic team to be a frontline star. I actually have a lot of questions for not only Nikodos, but Nertz as well, because even when he was on Ents, I think he had issues when the lights got a little bright, and now even with this Heroic team, when you're in ESL Pro League where the lights aren't bright, you know, you can shout at your opponent across the hallway, and that should be the most uncomfortable environment. But Nerds has had issues adjusting outside of, you know, the snappy in-game leading, I think, which is a problem for me. You know, I think he still puts up solid HLTV ratings, but you look at the rounds that he's able to win sometimes, and it doesn't feel as impactful as Shusher still, which I thought it was just an early symptom of it being a new roster. So yeah, I'm worried for Heroic, unfortunately. I thought they signed a good team considering Heroic was in like a weird snaky position before, but it's just not landed.
They have definitely, like, I still have no criticism for them in terms of the way they salvaged a roster and the moves they made, and honestly, to remain relevant at the elite level, they did what they had to do. They made a big-time signing in Nertz. They got together players who fit with their core, you know, picked up the pieces they needed, and then, you know, retooled. But the meme about Nikodos has been, he's better on a rifle than he is with an AWP. And if this team needed another rifler, honestly, great. He bangs heads. But they don't. They do need an AWPer, and he just hasn't been able to provide that sort of firepower. The Nerds angle is weird, because in certain games he will drop you the 1.5 rating, he will find loads of impact. But when you said like it feels like Tessez is more impactful, it's just because, well, Tessez isn't supposed to be the star, but he's having star level impact in so many big games, so many big rounds. You just feel like we should be having a different conversation right now. You know, when it's flat track and we're just beating down on people, sure, Nertz is all over them. But when things get tough against NIP, Nertz wasn't quite there.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have a really a good map against NIP, so I get the concern. I think it is more important to get an AWPer in than have an AWPer who's not going to be... I mean, being down on yourself when you're an AWPer, the AWPer's a heavy, confidence-based role. I hate to hear my AWPer say he's playing poorly from himself. I do want... Like, it's a delusional confidence type role. I do want to hear you tell me you're the best player in the world somehow, despite your 1.02 rating. Like, please, be Delulu. You're my AWPer. So... I'm not liking the sound of that. I would prefer, hell, if it is Dexter, make it Dexter. I mean, personality issues aside, he's very, very good on the AWP. He always has been, despite all those misgivings. So
yeah, the problem with the Dexter angle is that he hasn't played in the greater part of a year. So we don't know how good he is on Counter-Strike 2, let alone how much work he's been putting in sort of behind the scenes to be good. So
the Dexter, was it an overdrive or was it someone
I think it was
else?
overdrive, yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's some basis to it then. It's not just him throwing out theories, which he has been known to do. We've discovered that sometimes when he does that, he is throwing out an idea more than an actual rumour. But if that's a legit one, I don't hate the risk if I'm heroic. If I can get him on a discount because no one wants him, and he's still Dexter, I would take the risk.
Yeah,
I think that's fair enough. But yeah, that's the only big blip, really, so far.
It was funny, though. I mean, we had Heroic versus Complexity in the battle of the AWPers that are maybe even just better on rifles than they are the AWP. So, yeah. Complexity won, of course.
Yeah, they did, because, well, Elise showed up. Nertz didn't have the greatest series. Honestly, it just didn't really click. When I watched that game, I just thought they just looked a bit off. Like, I thought Heroic didn't look very good in that game as a team, and that was a bit of an issue. So despite getting a nice warm-up with NIB, they just couldn't convert it, so here we are. Complexity, neither one of us picked as a favourite. To be fair, if you had to tell me before the event you had to bet on one team out of Complexity and Heroic to make it, like to win, basically a best of 3 against each other, that's what they needed to do, I would have picked Heroic every time. Every time. I find it hard to justify the Complexity pick, so fair enough.
Holzik's had a very good tournament. You know, his new haircut or whatever.
Oh, was he
suiting him apparently. I think I'm gonna be honest. I radio listened to a lot of these games more so than I actually looked at like the player reactions and all that. I usually watch when the round was live, but I'm not paying full attention to like the player camera and seeing how is he touching his face after he's just died. I'm just thinking, look at minimap for the first 10 seconds of a round. Okay, this is how the round should go. Hear something different. Pay attention, you know?
Yeah.
So you could have a new I'd heard he didn't have the haircut anymore. I don't know if that's true.
Okay. Maybe he has a mullet, maybe he doesn't. That's all that's the news here.
That's the subtext. New haircut, new Holzer. He has been playing well though. That's mainly what I wanted to get across. He actually has been playing a lot better than the standard than I'd really laid out for him. Because I actually thought he was a liability at times for this Complexity roster. And if they were going to make a move, it'll be for Holzerk. But then he just has performances like this, and you're just thinking, if he does that consistently, this team are actually a legitimate like trophy contender, I think. Maybe the Riflers have a little worries, but...
Yeah, the one problem I have with that is that they did play Pera in the opener, and he did... Well, he looked like he was about on the same level as Pera, because that game was close. Not exclusively because Holzerk wasn't showing up, but in no small measure. Like, he was definitely a relevant factor, the fact that he did not have a good series against Pera. But no, he was good against Heroic. He doesn't need to be good against Navi tonight to go through. But it's a seeding game, and maybe they do care about having to not play the extra game.
Yeah.
Speaking of, we do have 2 picks that are currently unconfirmed. My Group C underdog of Monty is playing today against Furia. If they win, I'll go perfect 4 for 4 in Group C and D, which, wow, that sure would be nice. And we've got FlyQuest, your underdog pick, are playing, is it NIP to go through?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
NIP today at half 12.
It's very winnable.
It's shockingly feasible that FlyQuest actually come through. Man, Group D was dog shit. So, with all that recapped, let's start picking playoffs. We're making 3 picks, but we're doing them live, and I have in our little IMs, like I said, we're going to pick one underdog from a select group, essentially. They're the underdogs that you'd expect, but still, I just thought I'd write them out just so that we both are on the same page. But yeah, I have first pick. I'm going to make, I think, the easiest first pick. I'm going to take MOUZ. They're a group winner, so they're going straight to those quarterfinals. Not only that, but this is exactly the kind of event they're supposed to win. They won it last time. It's not a massive crowd, no like intense pressure really or scrutiny. You should be able to win this. They have had struggles obviously in the big stages before, and that's exactly why I'm picking them. This isn't a big stage. It's a stage with 30 people on their lunch break. So I'm not too worried about them having choking issues here. They looked, honestly, dominant coming through. They crushed Bad News Kangaroos, GamerLegion, and Liquid. So every game they've had to win so far, they've won. Their matchup in the opening game is going to be, well, it's going to be against someone who's already played a game or maybe 3. So it's about as optimal as it can be. I don't think there's any of the other group winners I'd rather have, and that's why I've taken them. Like, the only coin flip I had was maybe Vitality, but they've looked more iffy on their form, so I see no reason to take that risk. MOUZ Sports, this is your trophy again.
Yeah, I really can't argue against it because that's the same logic that I used to pick them when we were looking at the groups in the first place. Is that they were definitely favorites for this tournament to win it, just because it's not a big stage game. Even though ESL Pro League is quite a long process, it's the type of environment that they're going to be most comfortable on. They enjoy jumping on the broadcast for some commentary every so often. Like I've heard Zershin on the cast many a time at Pro League. These guys like that environment. They like vibing with everybody, and they play good Counter-Strike when they're there usually. So, no real surprise to see MOUZ taken away. A little bit miffed that my group stage pick is now your first pick coming into the playoffs, but that's neither here nor there.
First pick is first pick.
That's how it is. I understand. Game is game. I have no real qualms about it. I think there are some other feasible contenders though. I think that's where it's less about MOUZ choking and more about the caliber or level that some of these other teams are presenting at the moment, or even what they showed off in some of their group stage games that may prove to be too much of a task for MOUZ.
Okay. No, I don't think there's anyone I'm really scared of when it comes to MOUZ. I think there's games that they go into as like it's more of a coin flip than a guaranteed win. But none of those teams, aside from Vitality, are in a top seed, and Vitality, they might have to face them in a semi, maybe in a grand final. Yimfat's playing like the best rifler in the world. I'm going to take MOUZ Sports.
Cool. I'm going to go with NAVI.
Oh, really?
I'm not ahhing about this. I, at the start of Counter-Strike 2, thought they would have an era. I thought they would have a period where they were the best team in the world. They would figure it out all first, and it didn't happen. And some of that's not even... I don't even think it's really even my fault. Simple leaves the squad, and then they have to go figuring out how they replace him. I thought the Wonderful move was quite good, and he's showing, honestly, top-level form at the moment. I'm... With the level that we saw from Jail at the Major... Wonderful at the Major, and hell, Bit and Imma as well now in Pro League. These guys are playing pretty well-rounded Counter-Strike, and when I see JL in gunfights, I think more often than not he's going to win them, which is, you know, I put a lot of stock on his aim and the way that he's currently playing the game. You know, you might have words to say about his personality or, you know, him probably engaging with the camera too much. I think even Blade has mentioned this guy likes to look at the camera, and they're very well aware of that. But the man can play some Counter-Strike at the moment. He is playing world class. I would put him in the top 5 riflers in the world, if not even maybe even higher than that, if depending on whether or not Donk is allowed to compete at all these tournaments or not. Because he honestly is playing great, and also Imma had a great group stage as well. I just think this Navi team are hitting a good stride at the moment. I think they're peaking at the right time, so I've quite a lot of confidence coming into this playoffs for them.
I am a little more reserved because whilst JL he hasn't like turned to shit magically overnight since the major. He's not playing at the same level he was at the major, which everyone knew was unsustainable. Because when you said like, oh, well, I believe in his aim when he's going into a fight, I believe he's going to win it. That's the major. Wasn't just that. The major was he's going into a fight. No one has any right to win this fight. He gets 3. Like that was the major, and that was a problem, and it's a good part of the reason why they actually won the damn thing. He's not been that so far at Pro League. He's been pretty good and still a solid rifler, but their big series, you needed Imma to like really step up and take the reins in the way he hadn't on the fragging side. I'm not sold on the pick. I do think there were. Well, I've mentioned them before, and I'm probably going to pick them next. Vitality are probably a more solid pick in my eyes in terms of not only guaranteed the top seed, but also I don't have to rely on question marks like JL and like Imma having to come to form to help them win series against not too big a names. Like, I do think there's some question marks remaining. They look solid in terms of at least the way they play their own picks, and like when they're comfortable on the map, they're just going to stomp a lot of bad teams. I just think they have more weaknesses than we really want to count currently. Because considering they're the major winners, we're like, oh, we want them to not have this many flaws. But I think they are quite a flawed team in terms of map pool, fraggers, everything. It's just not consistent enough yet for me to be confident about them. That being said, they do have, if between Alexi B and the Imma like second caller sort of vibe I'm getting, they do have elite level calling. Like in terms of pre-round, mid-round, in terms of their coach's structure, they have everything right when it comes to strategy, at least. It's just a question of who delivers or who's capable of delivering. And I'm not really sold on, well, the fragging currently.
This also might be the most we've seen a double in-game leadership responsibility sort of. It's the most we've seen 2 in-game leaders sharing responsibilities look like on a roster from sort of the outside looking in, because Imma does talk a lot about what they want to do, and he's not even really an in-game leader, so it's a very peculiar situation. It's almost G2-esque with Hooksy and Nexa, but Nexa's not calling like that, and doesn't want to apparently, but Imma wants to. So,
well, G2 just have a whole bloody conversation going for every goddamn round. It seems there's not a caller and a second caller. It's just we're all constantly chatting. JKS, speak up. We want to hear you. Like, it's such an odd, like puggy as hell sort of mentality, but yeah. I think it's going to be fascinating to see how it develops, because if they can just out-call everyone and win events consistently, fair enough. I just don't see it really working long-term.
I think as well, it's just important for me to make this distinction, because it's not just that I believe in, or I've seen good stuff out of Imma at this event. I think Imma is fine being the 4th, hell, even the 5th worst player on this team. But at the same time, if he can hit those peaks and he can have those performances, then he could be a Rain for Navi. A guy that can see the game in a different way, can sometimes just have these massive pop-offs, but then can also, if he can find a more consistent output, I think at the moment his floor is a bit too low. But if he can raise his floor by 30%, this team is already showing elite level caliber in terms of how high their peaks could go. But their floor may need some adjusting, is maybe the angle I'll take here. But I have some confidence coming into the playoffs for Pro League at least.
Yeah, if there's no doubting that, the combination of wonderful, Bit, JL when he's in God mode, or even, just a little below it, and then Imma having a moment, that's elite level fragging. It's just, how much of that do we ever see? Realistically, we struggle to see a lot from Bit. Like, he's not really supposed to be the main star, it seems, but he's also not really giving us that much for level. We're supposed to see, like, apparently it's now a thing that JL is going to be the best rifler on the team. I don't see how long that's going to last. And Wonderful, whilst he is a really good AWPer and probably, like 4th or 5th best, if we always have this conversation, he's above Torji and Brokey.
Yep.
He's not quite Munacy. He's somewhere in that in-between space. It's not quite enough to be a carry by himself, is what we're saying. Like, he's definitely an elite AWPer. You can win events with him. He's just not going to solo carry. So, yeah, the fragging floor comes up to meet their calling floor. We can talk eras. I'm just not there yet. I'm not there yet. All right, my second pick, and I'm going to stick to the favourites. I'm sticking to group winners. I said I was going to pick them. Why wouldn't I pick them? I'm taking Vitality. My word. This has been a comeback. A revenge tour. They disappointed at the major, finished top 4, but disappointed at the major. And ZywOo especially had some concerns to address, and he has addressed them with absolute spankings of everyone they played. Sure, didn't have the toughest run, but I don't care. They looked comfortable, they looked aggressive, they looked poised, they had everything you'd want from a favourite, really. The fraggers were there. They didn't have any real struggles on any map against anyone. I see no reason not to take them. Now, could they beat... Because in a semi-final, they'll have to play, most likely, someone like MOUZ. We haven't got much of a track record recently of them doing it, but they have the pedigree, they have the talent. I have no qualms about this pick either. They're about as much of a lock as you can be, especially considering they only need to win, 3 games to be champions? I think it's a no-brainer. The only other favourite picks do have to take deeper runs. Like, I considered a phase, but they've got to make it all the way from that quarterfinal. Well, not quarterfinal, from round 1, as it's now called, because we just added rounds on rounds on rounds to this playoff.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult to take them. It's difficult to take phase to win that many when I can take Vitality to win 3 games. So, for me, it's an easy pick.
Also, yeah, a little bit of a caveat would be, yeah, FaZe could still do it because they do seem to like longer runs, but I do agree. It's just the logic does track, and it's something that I'll even. Sorry, just to touch back on my Navi pick. I don't even know if they're gonna have 3 games or 4 games to play. You know, there's a little bit more sort of to be desired in terms of that. So yeah, I have no real issues with Vitality. I always thought the conversation stemming from ZywOo and whether or not he was going to show good form again on Counter-Strike. I think the more valid argument I've seen is that, do we consider him a top-level AWPer in Counter-Strike 2? Because he's not AWPing as much, he's rifling more heavy, and in that vein, I could sort of see the angle, but he is still a top-level player, and I'm glad he's showing great form again here at Pro League. Yeah, the games, I think, were... You know, they play Sharks in the opening round. The Sharks team...
They're a top seed, but yeah.
Yeah, that is true. It's just, I don't expect Sharks to do any damage at an event like this.
No.
Not yet, at least. Actually, just not this team. Just not that team. But nobody took a map of Vitality. I still think they are contenders. I think a part of it comes down to calling, and I don't know whether or not ZywOo is always sick or what, but you know, that can't be an excuse. I have no issues with Vitality, unfortunately.
Yeah, and they won't need the excuse this time. They had it last time, and it might have been legit. I think it seemed legit, considering we didn't see a good ZywOo even in the easy stages, you know? When there's no stage, no pressure. So, and despite all that, as I said, I brought this up before, when we were doing our playoff picks, and I was happy to pick Vitality, or to defend Vitality, it was because they managed to make things work with a diminished ZywOo. They managed to get performances out of Spinks, performances out of Flames, things you weren't really usually able to rely on. The fact that they now have everything to go to. If they don't get a great ZywOo, if they're getting out-AWPed or out-dueled, you can have Spinks, you can have Flames actually win you rounds more consistently, and they believe in themselves that they can within this system under this caller, that they can take on that responsibility. So I'm very happy to take the pick, even if ZywOo doesn't have like a 1.7 rating like he has had so far. He doesn't have to maintain it.
That was the thing that was most impressive about the major, was that they actively shifted things so that they could get more out of Spinks and Flames. They put them in higher responsibility. And I think I remember saying this, or I remember discussing this with you. But the idea that that's a great proof of concept for them if they have issues like that in the future. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'd actually kind of even forgotten about the fact that we had that discussion before, but
We did, and it's ultimately relevant here because we do have full force ZywOo as far as we know. But if he has a rough half, on a map and it's a decider,
guys,
you just go ZywOo, here's a flashbang, Spinks Flames, do some damage,
Guys, it is the playoffs. It is your turn.
Yes, he has feasted, but now the restaurant is closed. Your turn. Right. That extended analogy aside, I've got Vitality. I'm delighted with my picks, but I'm curious to see who you've taken now, because I think everyone else you kind of have to make a bit more of a... You have to paint a bit of a picture for that's remaining in these favourites.
I'm trying to fight my own biases here. I'm trying really hard to fight my biases. Damn. Whatever. I'm just gonna go with it. I'm gonna pick VirtusPro. I want VirtusPro to win. I hate myself for doing it. I do. They scraped. They scraped through They did really scrape through their group. They lost to Fnatic in their opening round. But I can't pick them as underdogs. So I have to pick them as favorites. Listen, I've been a Jane believer for a very long time. And to be honest, I actually didn't hate the way that they were playing, even in their losses. Yes, the Fnatic one, the Fnatic one I did hate. The FaZe one, I almost felt like they just got super outdueled in very important positions. Whether that was Flit or Jame in positions to win rounds and just getting destroyed by either some great utility that FaZe were throwing or a great timing that was hit. That felt a little, if you play that same game over 3 times, one that could have been like significantly closer than what the FaZe VP 2-0 actually looked like.
No,
I wouldn't say it was a guaranteed win, but I just think there were a few moments where, yeah, the game actually could have been way closer. And then they stomp Fnatic to go through. They get Soul. They stomp them. I don't think I have great concerns, and they've also had time since making it out of their group to now adjust into the playoffs. Sure, they've got a lot of rounds to play, but VirtusPro love long games, so they're gonna have to love a long playoff too. Because I want to see them in more playoffs in the future. This team has to be elite level, given the signing that they have. I think the extra time is going to benefit them a lot. And Electronic, not Electronic. I think I saw Kassad make this take, and I do agree with it. If Jame doesn't succeed with this roster, he has a lot to answer for. Like, he might have won a major with a weaker roster to a certain degree. And I think that's a massive commendation to the way that he calls, the style that he's carved out for himself. But he needs to win with this roster because Norbert is playing high quality Counter-Strike. Flit is a top 10 rifler easy. And now you have Electronic too, who's that mix of experience, aggression, late round close. Like, he's a pretty full package. This has to be something that VirtusPro can tangibly say is a championship team.
The whole Jame angle, I know the take you're referring to was a hot take point made take. Mm-hmm. Love that show, but I do think it's fairly hot. It is fairly hot. It does. You're going to need some time, I think, to actually justify cutting Jame, of him actually having elite rosters, because he's taken so many garbage rosters way too far.
Yes,
we don't always forget about it, but it does sometimes fail to get mentioned. His Vanguard run to a major final with who and nobody, that was essentially who was on the roster as that guy and someone. Like, that's who was on that team, and he made a major final. He then won one with a slightly better version. Now, the question is he just an amazing IGL at optimizing weak pieces? Like, is that his strength? Is that specialty? Or can he, in this case, take in a big star, someone who already has his own ideas, his own playstyle, and established elite-level status, and integrate him and make it work with him? That's the question. Does failing to make it work with Electronic mean he's going to get cut from VirtusPro? I doubt it. I also don't think it's a prudent move to make if you are VirtusPro as an org.
Yeah, I maybe wouldn't go so far as to say he would get cut, but there will be a lot of, the same way that we would levy criticism at Alexi B for making it to a finals of a major and then moving into what OG and then G2 and then an IP and all of those projects just not pulling through, especially the G2 one. I think there is an angle to take here where there will be something that there will be a black mark on his career.
Sure.
I don't know that Virtus Pro would totally jump ship because I don't know that you can get a better in-game leader.
Yeah, the idea that electronics going to become your caller, I'm not on board with that.
No, I'm not on board on that with that at all. But I think just basically being able to levy more valid criticism at Jame, because I think a lot of people have high repute for Jame. They may not like the way that he calls, but they have a lot of respect for the fact that he has his own calling style and he's made it work with weak rosters. He made it to the finals of a major with Sanji, goddamn. And that guy could hit a dig shot, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, he occasionally hit a headshot. I mean, let's not get too excited. We all remember XMS.
He was on the dig a lot because of some interesting economic choices by Jame, but he's gone through many of those iterations. He is the finance minister. I want to believe in Virtus Pro. If not now, then the next tournament. But I'll probably still have a little bit of that unwavering confidence. I am a bit biased, I'm aware, but I'm leaning into it here.
Yeah, just to give him even more props. In case anyone was wondering, no, this Vanguard roster was Adren, Sanji, Buster, Kicker, Jame. There's not even one player we recognise as a star in 2019. Aside from Jame, who is the IGL and fucking AWPA. Like, that was an insane run. I mean, I'm looking back at the event now. I want to see how many
Buster
easy
and Kicker
games
were the guys. Buster and Kicker were the guys.
Buster and Kicker, come on. Yeah, they beat ZywOo's Vitality. They beat Renegades, which was probably a bit of a layup considering the matchups they could have had. And yeah, then they got crushed in the final, and it was a dead final. But that's an incredible run, and I think if he doesn't make it work, I mean, it's like this: if you were an Alexi B doubter, you didn't give him, you started, holding against him the moment he wasn't succeeding with elite level talents or with other projects.
Mm-hmm.
If you were more reasonable, you waited for 2 or 3 of them to have failed. Jame realistically has a lot of wiggle room before we start talking about really a black mark against his name, considering not only did he make a major final with lesser rosters, he won an entire major. And he's been elite consistently, no matter the level of his roster. So I think he gets honestly, he gets 2-3 attempts with Electronic in his roster to make iterations, to make changes, to make his own adaptations in his own game. I think he gets a lot of leeway. So I'm really not in a rush to start blaming him for anything. But no, yeah, Virtus Pro, a pick I would never make. Not because I don't believe in the IGL or the players. I like some of the players. I really like some of the players, and I think their IGL's elite, but they have to win 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games to win this event. And I know they like a long match, but having to play long match after long match after long match, especially if you're not able to just put the early teams away, considering some of the matchups you could have early on. So with Russ, I mean, I guess in terms of being 4th place, you have avoided G2. There's some tougher opponents maybe you would have not wanted to see, but you still probably have to end up playing through teams like Liquid just to get there. You'll have to have a fun time against FaZe potentially just to get past the second round. This is not an easy run.
So my raised concern is that, similar to a Cloud9 or a Furia when they get to playoffs or they get to a bracket, the calling seems to change slightly. Sometimes with Virtus Pro, that's actually the problem, is that it doesn't change. Because when you get into playoff games or you get into deep stage tournament, you actually have to shift the way that you call to a certain degree to have a bit more of that killer instinct. Players are going to be a little bit more aggressive. Some of them are actually going to play more scared, but it's finding the right moments and the right teams to implement that against. And it's what made the ramp up to the Rio Major so good for Jame and Co. is that when it got to those higher pressure games against top level opposition, I remember them playing against ENCE at Rotterdam for the final, they play way more aggressive when they're playing against the ends. They understood that they were the only team they had to be concerned about. They called rushes all pretty consistently. They had some good entry utility. It didn't feel like you were watching VirtusPro, and that's what initially sparked my interest for them going into that major. Is that yeah, if they have that level of depth and they can show that versatility, this team becomes a much more significant threat. It almost felt like 2 years of creating the illusion of, oh, we only play slow Counter-Strike. And then all of a sudden, it's rushes all the time. And you're just thinking, all the prep that we did for this game didn't matter. So...
yeah, gone are those little lurks, gone are the little maneuvers. They're just smashing our face in with this shockingly talented rifle core that definitely can play like this.
I just need them to do that when we get into the ESL Pro League playoffs as well. That's it. Because sometimes sometimes they get deep into tournaments, especially in some of the online cups and things they go through. They still play slow, boring Counter-Strike, and we're all trying to push this narrative. This is not the same VP that plays slow, and then you'll watch 18 rounds straight where it does still come down to the last 20 seconds, and you're thinking, I know you don't only play like that now. I know that you have more to it. They turn that switch off sometimes, and I think it comes to their deficit.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. I think one thing we have to address now, because we've both picked favourites here, as in we've got them lined up, we know who we're getting. There's one team we haven't picked, who we've taken a little bit of criticism for, not believing in. And I want to hear your take on this team. Astralis. Where are we? Are we finally sold on them? They topped their group. They won all the games they needed to. I mean, sure, their decider game to top their group was against 3D Max, but they beat FaZe on the way through. They took care of Eternal Fire pretty comfortably, who, whilst they didn't go through in the end, they were still a problem team and difficult to deal with. Are we finally believing in Astralis, or is this still just carryover old strats? Everyone's just loosey-goosey having fun with the old system. Device isn't that much of a caller yet. We'll see how it goes. How are we vibing?
I hate that this team has done so well so quickly, because that does put you in a position where, yeah, do you have to consider them as a real threat? It's so early in the cycle for me to have a strong opinion one way or the other. Yes, they've had some impressive results. Yes, they've had some impressive wins. You know, beating FaZe and VirtusPro at IEM Chengdu is a massive result for them. And to them to beat FaZe again in ESL Pro League, it is wild. It's so early to say. It's too early to say, because it's not just, oh, the new roster, they bring in Bro. It's the fact that Device is also in-game leading, and maybe they're leaning into strengths and they're doing so in a way that Blame couldn't before, but it's hard to say how well this will last, and how much better things will, whether things will even continue to improve or not moving into playoffs, because IEM Chengdu could just be a complete anomaly. You could get into Pro League and people are bickering because what happened in the Chengdu playoffs is now happening here again at Pro League, and people are discontented. There's so many different facets to understanding how the team chemistry is going to build behind the scenes, and how people are going to register with criticisms or problems that happen in the game, whether that's going to sort of manifest itself more organically or not, or whether it's just, yeah, this is a grace period. We understand it's the honeymoon. Yeah, everyone's in new roles, but we're going to make it work, guys. Keep positive attitude. At a certain point, that does wane on you. That does deteriorate. You don't get that grace period 3 to 6 months down the line.
Yeah.
That's the concern. It's too early. I don't have strong opinions. They have good results.
Yeah.
That's all I can say, really.
My problem is, the reason I don't pick them is that I just, philosophically, in my overall sort of meta-analysis of Counter-Strike, cannot see a team with 5 players all at a 1.3 rating and go, that's going to work. That's how Counter-Strike's played. Yep. Makes sense. You're going to win events. Because that's kind of what they looked like at Chengdu. Then they went to the playoffs and everyone was at a 1.01 when they got to playoffs and lost. You see what I mean? There needs to be more clearly defined, boundaries and roles and understanding of who's actually going to be winning you games. It can't just be fucking anyone at any given moment is going to be expected to go win a map. Like, that's not quite how things work. So I'm not sold on them purely on that basis of just my meta view of Counter-Strike as someone who's watched so goddamn much of it is that this just won't work. Like, in the long run, it won't work. And in the playoffs at Chengdu, it didn't work. Here, their opening game, we don't know who it's going to be up against. They do have one of the short runs to the finals. So if there was a time period of which to like extend this and an event at which to do it, it would be Pro League with its, fake stage and relatively short playoff run for them. This could be the time they actually make it happen. So I'll concede that point that actually this is the perfect time to pick them. If you're a believer of Astralis, if you're people who leave comments telling us we should take them more seriously, go put money on them. This is the event. Place your bets. Money where your mouth is. I'm not going to. Feel free.
This is not financial advice.
This is not financial advice, but it's basically just straight machismo. Grow a pair, put your money on it, if you do believe in them that much, because I really don't when it comes to the playoff runs. But I will admit, this is the time and the place. Essentially. That's my long and short of it on Astralis. I think that was important that we cover them just because they did win their group. We can't say otherwise. Like, we can't really downplay their performance so far at Pro League. Even though neither one of us believed, they have performed.
And they were in the stacked group, so it's all the credit to them, really.
Yeah, they did. Of all the number one seeds, they maybe have the most impressive victory of them all. They actually beat FaZe in their group. So that's a pretty impressive feat. Now let's make our underdog picks. There's not that many I'm super confident in, and I am delighted that I have first pick right now, because I think there's only one team that I think is both capable of doing this and fun to justify. Let's put it that way. I'm going to take our favourite, a team we love to talk about, a team we love to root for. I'm taking Mongolz. This is the best we've ever seen them play. And I'm not just saying that because they crushed G2, because anyone can crush G2 at this point, it feels like. But they also beat Falcons in a way that I really didn't expect. I mean, when I saw the Mirage blowout, I thought, oh, Falcons are just shit. But then, they actually went to a map 3, and they held their nerve, and they won a close game. And they did it whilst having, strategy, firepower coming from different places, not just Blitz, single-handedly calling and fragging. It was 9-10. It was Techno. This is something we've not really seen from them in the past. Like, consistent, star performers showing up beyond Blitz is something we don't usually have to rely on. And yeah, they did crush G2, and they did get crushed by Vitality. So they are obviously not a favourite by any means, and it's going to be difficult to see them go through, but they only have to win 4 games, and they're an underdog. They don't even have to make it all the way to the final or win for me to be making points. Like, they've got a lot of potential here. It just depends on, I think, how the matchups end up shaking out. Yeah. But of all the teams that we've listed as our underdog choices, I'm the most confident in them to actually make a dream run happen.
I am annoyed because we're doing this live. That was going to probably be my pick as well. But I'll play more devil's advocate here. The Mongols don't have clear defined stars. They have Senzu sometimes. Kato was a big anomaly, really. They have 9-10 as a consistent. He AWPs. He does his job. Probably not much more, not much less. Sometimes has some good clutches or some really high impact rounds. And then you have the random breakouts from Mazinho and Techno darted in around it. All while Blitz is supposed to be like a fragging in-game leader. They do not have someone that they can very consistently rely on to actually have big performances against top-level teams. It does feel like they chop and change, and maybe I don't know what the preparations are like behind the scenes, because for all I know, they could actually have players hard anti-stratting specific teams, and their responsibilities are different. Maybe in an offloaded responsibility. I don't really know, but it doesn't feel consistent. Even though the calling does vary from team to team, I have a lot of faith in Blitz to actually come in with the right prep. It just sometimes falls flat on me because I can't always rely on Techno. I can't always rely on Senzu.
Yeah.
The only one that are really consistent are 9-10 and Blitz for me. And this was a performance where Blitz didn't have those big pop offs. Fine, maybe that's them actually trying to figure things out. I don't know what's going on, but that's where some of the faith also becomes a bit of a maybe potential liability down the line, because I haven't seen that when we get to a playoffs, Senzu will perform or Techno will perform. All I've seen when we get to playoffs or we get out of groups is Blitz frags, everybody else lags behind.
Yeah, it's fair. They are not a they're not a team without flaws, that's for sure. And that's been one of the most frustrating aspects for me, has historically been. Like, I'm told Senzu's a star. I'm told he can second up. He's got all this wicked talent. I never see a consistent showing from him. Even across sometimes a best of one. Like, I cannot rely on Senzu to have a solid map, let alone a series. The Blitz aspect is always interesting to me because I always imagine him as actually just straight up one of the stars. For me, the role players in this team who aren't really supposed to be fragging out 90% of the time are Techno and Mazzinho. They are the fills who will undoubtedly have highlights because they both have incredible raw mechanics. And they're essentially the soldiers of the team. But no, I think for me to be more reliant, more excited about this pick, and honestly in general more excited about them as a roster, it's going to have to be 9-10 finding another gear, and Senzu delivering on what I've been promised he is. Because I was imagining Senzu would come in and he'd just be score. In terms of when, early days when they were making things happen and scores on that roster, back on IHC, and actually dumping on real good players. I thought that's kind of what I'd get out of Senzu. He hasn't been that yet, not with any consistency. But if we get that, then yeah, I mean, they'll take another step forward. They'll take another leap. Because they really have taken bounds.
You can definitely tell the Mongols are young, with the way that they make mistakes, and sometimes the ways that they're sort of overwhelmed in sight hits. You can tell that some of these players are young because from one moment they'll look like they've seen this exact strategy before and they know exactly where all their heads are going to be, and they shoot everybody before they come out. But then other times it'll be a completely different person holding the mouse. They lack sort of internal consistency or sort of forecasting as to what's going to happen, like some of these more veteran players are going to express. So yeah, you definitely feel that way moving in. It's funny because I feel a lot of people try to make the comparison for Blitz to somebody else within the European circuit. Blitz to me is almost like a Mongolian Tabson, has stuck true to the scene, very integral piece, and fragging, in-game leader, kind of a star, I do agree, but almost you don't want him to be a star if he's going to be in-game leading. It's kind of in that same philosophy. And he has, honestly, he calls a great game, especially between him and Mara. I feel like they have a very good game plan. So
they definitely deserve a lot of credit. So tandem, that's always a thing. The Coach Agile tandem does define a lot, and those two have done a great job of just constantly integrating different players till they figured out this probably is their best lineup in terms of suiting their needs. Hence why we've seen them stick together and honestly get so much better. So yeah, they're always going to get the majority of the credit, and Blitz especially. I mean, if for a guy who puts you he calls and gives you a 1.1 something rating 90% of the time, bloody hell, that is about as valuable as a player can be. Can you imagine if Alexi B was fragging like that? It's essentially the comparison you have to make. So yeah, really impressed with him. Really hoping they can make a little bit of something happen, make a semi-final. That'd be nice, just for the points. Yeah, that'd be lovely. But no, Yumi, over to you. Who have you taken from this list of, not so study teams?
Yeah, see, I knew we were getting here, and I still couldn't.
I think I know who I know who I would want you to take if I was rooting for you to win. I'm going to type it in ahead of time because I think I know who you're going to take.
Well, okay, I don't know if I should double. Thing is, these are two picks that I made before.
Yep.
That I'm bouncing between, and I'm gonna go GamerLegion. I'm just gonna go GamerLegion.
Fucking knew it.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna do it. I knew it was gonna happen.
It's between Batboom and GamerLegion for me, and to be honest, it feels more like I have more problems with Batboom than I do GamerLegion. If I'm gonna angle it that way, it's not that sort of truly believe that this is the right time for GamerLegion. I think we talked about it earlier. Just the idea that they're going to need time to develop and understand how much work they're going to put in, what changes they're going to have to make to adjust to the teams that they have ahead, whether or not you can sort of feasibly rely on some of the changes and implementations that Ash will have drawn up, or whatever anti-strat material people come up with within the GamerLegion roster. But I just don't trust BetBoom right now. I used to have a lot of faith in Zorte, in particular, and right now there's no killer instinct. I don't feel like I can expect him to win clutches or turn rounds on their head consistently like he would have used to. NAVI also very inconsistent individually. I think when they started to look good in their initial tour as BetBoom, I was very surprised by kind of how well he was doing. Well, it was for I Am Sydney. But that felt like that was a weird honeymoon period as well. So yeah, I have worries more so about BetBoom because I don't know that they have the same structure or same people that they can bounce ideas between. GamerLegion have the likes of Ash, outside of just the in-game in-game leading responsibilities of Snacks. You've got experience as well as sort of a Ash is not a fresher mind, but in terms of not being on the same stages as someone like Snacks or some of these top level players, some of the other players that have transitioned into coaching, this is a guy that had a lot more to prove and did so when they had Paris. Now as well, the way that he's sort of directed GamerLegion ever since. So yeah, I want this team to do well. It might not be the right time, but I have less problems with the philosophy and the way that they're building towards being a successful team on the GamerLegion side, rather than what BetBoom have to offer.
Yeah, I think you're entirely correct, honestly. I didn't just guess you were going to pick them because you're predictable. It's also because they are probably the better pick. Even though, yeah, they got new pieces. There might be teething issues. There might be problems with come playoff pressure a little more. Like, they might look a little more shaky. But I honestly, I've said it already on this video, I really rate the players they've brought in terms of the way they've recruited and also just what I've seen on the server.
Mm-hmm.
Andu was a guy I didn't know much about. His GamerLegion Academy numbers didn't seem that crazy, and especially the level opposition the Academy team usually played against, I wasn't putting too much stock in anything. The fact that he then just came in and started banging heads off, I was like, alright, fair enough. Like, he's not playing a complicated role, but goddamn is he doing it well. And Slend, I thought, was honestly the better signing in terms of just on paper. I've seen Slend already in other teams. He was from NXT and Endpoint. He constantly playing in places players tend to develop into polished, proper stars. Like, think about the track record of MOUZ NXT and Endpoint combined. The players we're talking about here, like, that is the ultimate. That's ultimate academy system come through. It's like a kid who went to Barcelona's academy, then Real Madrid's academy, took a detour via Chelsea's academy, then came out as a star player. Like, you're not surprised.
The whole time you're getting gold stars along the way. Everyone's like, oh, you're another one of those guys.
Exactly, right? He got top marks at the best schools, essentially, is what we're talking about here. I'm not worried about Slend's level long term. You're right in being a bit hesitant to say this is exactly when they're going to go win, but in terms of a gamble for a team that might make a run to a semi-final, or take just a scalp or two and not be an embarrassment to you as the guy picking them, yeah, I think that's a really good pick. And honestly, BetBoom, it's NAVI strike. I don't want to put money on it at any given moment. I'm going to be honest, it's rough.
I would say part of my hesitation for both of it is that I could see GamerLegion just losing their first round game. Like, we don't know what their first round is going to be, but I could see that very feasibly happening and just thinking, well, that's a very flat underdog pick. But yeah, I think it's just more choosing them for the projection of what they can be or what they could be in the future.
Yeah. And also, your other choices are a bit shite.
That is also fair.
Let's put it bluntly. I mean, 3D Max, anyone believing in that continuing? Because I'm not. I'm really not.
The same way we were talking about Astralis being the top out of their group, 3D Max also making it second out of their group is, that's nothing to scoff at, really. But
nothing to scoff at. But then you see who they played, and it is.
Yeah.
We've got the I've put these teams because there's some games aren't decided. So like the winner of Monty Furia, you could have picked whoever that would have ended up being. As much as I like Monty, and that's who I think's going to win, I don't have to risk being stuck with Furia, and I don't think even Monty's that convincing of a pick to make me want to take that risk. Same can be said, well, or it's even worse with FlyQuest NIP. Do you want to be saddled with either one of these guys coming into the playoffs as your pick?
I mean, I want FlyQuest to win, but going to the playoffs, probably absolutely not.
Rough. Yeah. So yeah, no, it's the best of a bad bunch in that sense. I think you can honestly say the same thing about Mongolz. They're not really a favourite to win any of the series they're going to be playing, unless they get lucky. So they're just the best of these results.
I'd like to also clarify. There was a moment where I was very critical of GamerLegion, and I'm aware that I've now, I think since that video that we did, picked them more often than not. Listen, I did let some of my personal biases affect me to a certain degree, sure, but they've also, I think there's a lot of solidarity that I get, or at least confirmation that I get when the moves that they've made are also right in line with what I thought their moves should have been way back then. So we've come to, I think we've come to an understanding. I've always appreciated the way that GamerLegion play, or like their philosophy. So I'm going to continue to bank on them. They're not going to be my favorite team. VirtusPro are still that, unfortunately. Everybody hates James, and I'm not one of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just thought I'd just address that because I'm very well aware. Oh, this is the guy that was always ragging on GamerLegion. Now he's picking them all the time. Listen, they are a solid team, and they do have some very impressive results. But they also probably should have made this move sooner. So,
as a team that's always an underdog pick, and a team that we always preface by saying they have really good backroom staff and prep and all this other stuff, and generally a solid calling basis as well, we've never actually had a problem with that side of things. It's always been they have zero top-end talent. Yeah. Nothing going on. It's just not going to work. And that was always our criticism, that the players weren't good enough. And guess what? We were right. Every goddamn time. So we've remained consistent in that sense.
Yeah,
like, that's not actually changed.
And they've still not got top-tier talent, really. Like, if we're thinking
it's definitely an upgrade. Like,
yes, and they're definitely, they're trying to do what Sprout failed to do effectively. Is like build up rosters. Some of those players are going to leave or get sold, or but they're facilitating in very much the same way as like a MOUZ NXT or an Endpoint, but they are competing at these big events. They are doing it at the big events, as opposed to just being a feeder team without that same proof of concept when you get into these bigger tournaments. They are showing that proof of concept pretty consistently. So
yeah, and they deserve a lot of credit for that. Honestly, the fact that they've maintained their position, like them and Monty being able to maintain positions in Tier 1 for so long. I mean, not as a real consistent contender, but as just a team that's always there and always a problem. It's been impressive.
There definitely was a moment where Monty were the more impressive squad because they were improving after the Paris major, even with all like the weird things that were happening.
And they had better players. Like it made sense.
And for GamerLegion, they were more deteriorating because Shuei leaves, Imma's gone, replacements, trying to find the right fits, all that. Right? It was more trying for them, it seemed, than for Monty, even though they went through kind of similar structural changes to a certain degree. So.
Yeah, we'll see how this goes. They've moved their ceiling up a lot, and that's basically the most impressive part of all this. We'll see if it holds course. Like I really hope it does, because I rate their philosophy in the signings they've made. Yeah, finally, we're not GamerLegion haters, as it were.
Well, at least I'm not. Maybe remains to be seen.
We'll see. Yeah. The playoffs don't start till, is it Monday or Tuesday they start? But we still got games today.
I believe, yeah.
Okay. There's still games today to play out, so we'll see how those go. Currently, in terms of the scoreboard, actually the viewers are ahead, but the gap isn't as big as it used to be. There's been a few blips on the viewer scoreboard, and so we're still down like 6 and 7 points each. You're actually ahead currently.
Okay.
We'll see how that remains if FlyQuest and Monty get the results that I desire. But we'll keep updating. Hopefully the viewers don't get a good playoff pick. And yeah, thank you for watching. If you made it this far, you're my hero. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one.
Take Astralis.
Goodbye.